The moment is already over. The car has passed. The argument has ended. The person has walked away, or the door has closed, or the near miss has missed. You are safe, completely verifiably safe. And that is exactly when your hands start. You notice it first when you reach for something. A glass, a door, handle your phone. And the hand that has served you flawlessly for your entire life suddenly cannot perform this one small task without announcing itself. So you do what everyone does. You hide it. You put the hand in a pocket. You wrap both of them around a cup. You press your palms flat against your legs and hold them there, and you keep talking in a normal voice as though nothing is happening below the table. Because there is something humiliating about it. Not the fear, not the anger. Those you could explain and defend and describe in words that made you sound reasonable. The shaking is different. The shaking is your body going over your head and telling the room what actually happened to you. And here is what makes it strange. It arrives late. During the emergency, you were fine. Sharp even. You saw the car. You moved. You said the thing you needed to say. Your hands did exactly what you asked of them, right up until the second there was nothing left to do. And then in the calm, they fell apart. Think about that ordering for a moment, because it is backwards. If shaking were part of surviving the danger, it should happen during the danger. That is when you need whatever it is offering. Instead, it waits politely until the crisis is resolved, and then it shows up useless in a quiet kitchen while you stand there gripping the counter. You have felt this 100 times and never once questioned the sequence. So here is the question, and it is not the one you think. Why does your body shake at all? Sit with how badly this fits, because the more closely you look, the less sense it makes. Start with what shaking actually costs you. A trembling hand is a hand that cannot do precise things. It cannot thread a needle or hold a knife steady or type a message without errors. It cannot aim. So imagine this response evolving. Imagine a body building. A system that activates in the presence of danger. And what that system does is degrade your fine motor control at the exact moment your life depends on getting something right. That is not a survival advantage. That is a design flaw so obvious it should have been eliminated a million years ago. And it was not eliminated. It is universal. Every person alive does this. So do dogs. So do horses and rabbits and mice. Nature does not usually preserve pointless sabotage across an entire kingdom of animals. Which means it is not sabotage, which means we are reading it wrong. There is a second thing that does not fit, and it is even harder to explain. The shake of terror and the shake of rage are the same shake. Think about that. Fear and anger could hardly be more different. One makes you want to disappear, the other makes you want to advance. One shrinks you, one expands you. They feel like opposites from the inside, and yet the hands do the identical thing. Same tremble. Same frequency. Same betrayal at the same moment. If your body were producing a response tailored to a threat, you would expect 2 different responses for 2 opposite reactions to that threat. You get one, which suggests that whatever is happening in your hands is not really about fear and not really about anger, and might not be about the situation at all. So, what is it? The first explanation is the one everybody already knows, and it is the one you would give if someone asked you at a party. Adrenaline. Something frightens you, and a chemical floods your system, and your body goes into fight or flight. That phrase, fight or flight, came from a physiologist named Walter Cannon working over a century ago. He was studying what happens inside an animal that suddenly finds itself in danger, and he mapped a response that was startlingly fast and remarkably total. The moment a threat registers, a signal races down through the nervous system to 2 small glands sitting on top of your kidneys. And they release a chemical into your bloodstream that changes almost everything about you within seconds. Your heart accelerates. Your airways open. Blood is pulled away from your skin and your stomach and redirected into the large muscles of your arms and legs. Sugar is dumped into your blood, ready to burn. Your pupils widen. Cannon's insight was that this was not a collection of separate reactions. It was a single coordinated preparation, a body reconfiguring itself all at once for maximum physical effort. You are being loaded. And that is where most people stop, because it feels like an answer. Adrenaline surges, body revs up, hands shake, case closed. Except it explains almost nothing about the shaking. Because look at what that explanation actually claims. It says your body is flooding with energy for action. Fine. But energy for action should produce action, power, speed, a body that does more, harder, and faster, not a wobble. Nobody has ever explained a trembling hand by saying it has too much strength available. That is not what strength looks like. When you lift something heavy, your muscles do not tremble because they are strong. They tremble when they are near the limit of what they can control. So the adrenaline story tells you the tank is full. It does not tell you why the machine rattles. And it fails completely on the timing. Remember the sequence. You were steady during the crisis. The shaking came afterward. But adrenaline is released at the beginning. It floods you the moment the threat appears, not the moment it disappears. If shaking were a direct consequence of that flood, you should be trembling in the middle of the emergency when the levels are highest. You are not. You are often unnervingly calm. The shaking comes in the aftermath when the danger is gone and the chemical is already washing out. That is not a straightforward cause and effect. Something else is going on. And there is a third problem, and it is the one that eventually cracks this open. The adrenaline story treats the shaking as something new, something that arrives from outside and takes over a body that was previously still. But your body was never still. To see what is really happening, you have to zoom in on something you have never noticed about yourself. Hold out your hand right now, stretch it out in front of you, and hold it as steady as you possibly can. Look at it. It looks still, and it is not. Your hand is oscillating right now in tiny movements too small for your eye to resolve. Fast, rhythmic, continuous. Roughly 8 to 12 times every second, your hand is drifting off target and being pulled back. This has a name. Physiological tremor. And every healthy person has it constantly from birth to death. It has never stopped. It is happening while you sleep. It happened during every steady moment you have ever had. You have simply never been able to see it. And once you know that, the whole question changes shape. Because you are not asking why your hand starts shaking under stress. Your hand is always shaking. You are asking why it becomes visible. So look at where that permanent tremor comes from, because it explains everything that follows. Holding your hand still is not a passive state. It is not like a rock sitting on a table. Holding still is a task, an active, continuous, exhausting task that your nervous system performs constantly without your knowledge. Here is why. Your arm is heavy, gravity is relentless, and your muscles are not machines that lock into position. They are bundles of fibers that contract in pulses, and they are constantly drifting. So your body monitors. Buried inside your muscles are tiny sensors that report continuously on stretch and position. Am I where I am supposed to be? A. Fraction off. Correct. That loop runs thousands of times a minute. Detect the drift, send the correction overshoot, slightly detect the new drift, correct again. That is the tremor. It is not a flaw in the system. It is the system working. The visible residue of a machine holding a position by constantly catching itself. You are not still. You are being stabilized. Now you know exactly what adrenaline does. It does not create a shake. It turns up the gain on a loop that was already running. The chemical reaches receptors on the muscle fibers themselves, and it makes them more responsive, more twitchy, more eager to fire. So every correction in that endless loop lands harder than it needs to. The overshoot gets bigger. The catch gets more forceful. The oscillation that was invisible at normal volume becomes an oscillation you can see across a room. The tremor did not begin. It got amplified. And that immediately explains something you have noticed your whole life without thinking about it. Why the hands? Why is it always the hands and the knees and the jaw? Why does nobody say my thighs were shaking so badly I had to sit down? It is simple physics. A tremor is an oscillation, and an oscillation moving a heavy object produces a small visible movement, while the same oscillation moving a light object produces a large one. Your thigh is a substantial mass of muscle and bone. Push it rhythmically, and it barely stirs. Your fingers are light. Your jaw is hinged and light. Your knee, when you are standing with the leg unloaded, swings freely. Same signal running through the whole body. It only becomes visible where there is not enough weight to damp it out. So the shaking you can see is not where the response is strongest. It is where the body is lightest. The trembling was everywhere. Your hands are just the part with nothing to hide behind. Which is also why your voice goes, you have heard this in yourself, and it is worse than the hands because you cannot put your voice in your pocket. You start to say something that matters, and the sound arrives with a wobble in it, and everyone in the room hears exactly what your hands were doing under the table. That is the same mechanism in one of the lightest muscle systems you own. Your voice is produced by folds of tissue, vibhaled sureme of air held under precise tension by very small muscles. Everything about the sound depends on that tension staying constant. Turn up the gain on those muscles, and the tension oscillates. And the pitch rides the oscillation up and down several times a second. That is a shaking voice, not emotion leaking into your speech. A control loop overshooting in tissue too light to absorb it. And the same thing happens in the jaw, which is why teeth chatter in terror the way they do in cold, which is itself a clue worth following. Because your body has another situation where it makes muscles oscillate on purpose, cold. When your temperature drops, your nervous system starts driving your muscles into rapid, involuntary contraction, not to move you anywhere. Muscle contraction is inefficient, and inefficiency means waste heat. And waste heat is exactly what you need. Shivering is your body burning fuel to keep you warm. And notice how similar it looks. The jaw goes, the hands go. The same lightweight parts oscillating at speed while you clamp your arms against your sides and try to hold yourself still. Two completely different problems, cold and terror, producing a body that behaves almost identically. That is not a coincidence. It is a shared piece of equipment. Your body has one mechanism for making muscles fire rapidly and rhythmically without moving you, and it uses that mechanism for more than one job. Turn it on to generate heat, and you shiver. Turn the sensitivity up under adrenaline, and you tremble. Which is why the two get confused so easily. You come out of something frightening and you feel cold, and you tell yourself it is the weather. It might not be. Your blood has been pulled away from your skin and redirected into your large muscles, which leaves your hands genuinely colder than they were a minute ago. Cold hands shaking in a warm room. You reach for the explanation that makes you look less shaken. Just chilly. Your body knows better. And that is why you cannot stop it by deciding to. You are not trying to stop a movement. You are trying to quiet a control system, and the control system is not taking requests. It runs below the level where your intentions reach. The loop between muscle and spinal cord does not have an input for embarrassment, which sets up something genuinely unfair. The moment you notice your hands, you want to hide them. And wanting to hide them means you are now worried about being seen shaking. That worry is itself a threat. A social one, but your body does not grade threats by category. It responds the only way it knows. More signal, more chemical, more gain. So the shaking gets worse precisely because you noticed it and wished it would stop. Everyone who has ever tried to steady a hand in front of an audience has run this loop. You watch yourself, and the watching feeds it, and the feeding gives you more to watch. You cannot win that argument by force. You can only stop feeding it. Once you understand the mechanism this way, the paradox from the beginning finally dissolves. Remember the objection. A shaking hand cannot do precise work. So why would evolution build a danger response that wrecks your precision at the worst possible moment? The answer is that it was never protecting your precision. It was trading it away. Your body has two very different kinds of motor control, and they want opposite things. There is the fine kind. Small muscles, tiny adjustments, threading and writing and tying and aiming. This kind needs a quiet system, low gain. Delicate corrections. Any amplification ruins it. And there is the gross kind. Large muscles, maximum output, running and climbing and lifting and striking. This kind wants the opposite. High gain, fast recruitment. Muscles that fire hard on the slightest command. You cannot optimize for both at once. Turning up the responsiveness that makes a leg explode into a sprint is the same adjustment that makes a finger overshoot. So when danger arrives, your body makes a choice, and it chooses the big. Because think about what actually saved your ancestors. Not threading a needle, not signing their name neatly. Running, climbing, hitting something. Holding onto a branch with everything they had. In the situations this system evolved for, fine motor control was worth almost nothing, and gross motor power was worth everything. So the trembling hand is not a bug in the survival response. It is the receipt. It is what fine control looks like after it has been sacrificed to make your legs faster and your grip stronger. You are not being sabotaged. You are being reconfigured, and the tremor is the visible cost of the configuration. And now look at where that leaves you. The trade was brilliant for a body that needed to escape something with teeth. It is catastrophic for a body that needs to sign a document, hold a microphone, thread a suture, or pass someone a full cup of coffee without spilling it. Your body is still making the same trade. It has no way of knowing the terms have changed. It cashes in your precision to buy you a sprint every single time, and then hands you the bill in a situation where you needed the precision and will never use the sprint. Which explains something else that has always seemed unfair. The shaking is worst in exactly the situations where it matters most that you appear calm. That is not cruelty. It is the same trade made in the wrong century. And once you understand the mechanism this way, something becomes testable. Because if the shaking really is caused by a chemical reaching a specific kind of receptor, then blocking that receptor should stop the shaking without touching anything else about the emotion. That is exactly what happens. There is a class of drug that does precisely this. It sits on those receptors and prevents adrenaline from binding to them. The heart stops racing, the hands go quiet. Its development, led by a researcher named James Black, was significant enough to earn a Nobel Prize, and it transformed the treatment of heart conditions. But it also produced a quieter, stranger effect that nobody planned. Performers discovered it. Musicians who could play flawlessly at home and fell apart on a stage. Surgeons, marksmen, public speakers. Take the drug, and the visible symptoms of terror simply do not appear. Now here is the part worth pausing on, because it tells you something about what the shaking is and is not. The fear does not necessarily disappear. People report the strange experience of still feeling nervous, while their body refuses to cooperate with the nervousness. The hands stay steady. The voice holds. The mind is anxious in a body that is behaving as though it isn't, which proves the trembling and the emotion are separable. The shake is not the fear. The shake is a downstream mechanical consequence running in the muscles one step removed from whatever you are feeling. And that opens the door to something that should genuinely unsettle you. Because if the shake is just chemistry hitting muscle, then it does not know why it was called. Remember the thing that made no sense earlier. Anger and fear produce the identical tremble. You now have the answer, and it goes further than you might want it to. The body does not distinguish. It cannot. The same nervous pathway fires the same glands, release the same chemical, and the same muscles amplify the same permanent tremor. The hardware has no idea whether you are about to run away or throw a punch. Which raises a genuinely uncomfortable question. If the body's response is identical in both cases, then what makes one of them anger and the other one fear? In the early 1960s, two psychologists named Stanley Schachter and Jerome went looking for exactly that. They gave people injections of adrenaline, and here is the crucial part. They did not always tell them what to expect from it. So participants found themselves with a pounding heart, a warm face, and trembling hands, and no ready explanation for any of it. Then those people were placed in a room with someone else who was behaving a particular way. In some cases, that person acted cheerful and playful. In others, irritated and increasingly annoyed. And the participants' reported emotions followed the room. The same physical state, produced by the same substance, was experienced as amusement in one setting and anger in another. The proposal that came out of this work is uncomfortably simple. Your body produces a state of arousal. It is largely undifferentiated, a general alarm rather than a specific message. And then your mind looks around, finds a reason, and applies a label. The body brings the intensity. The situation supplies the name. Which means the shaking hands you have always read as fear or as fury are not really telling you which one it is. They're telling you that the system fired. The interpretation is yours. And this reframes the moment in the kitchen entirely. Because it means when you stand there afterwards, hands trembling, and you decide this is fear or you decide this is rage, you are not reading a signal off your body. You are writing one onto it. There is still the question of timing, and now it can finally be answered. Why does the shaking arrive after the danger instead of during? Start with the half of it that surprises people most. Why were you so steady during way? You saw the car and your hands did exactly what you needed. You said the difficult thing in a voice that held. In the moment itself, you were not trembling at all. Part of that is simple mechanics. A tremor is only visible against stillness. When your hands are already moving, gripping, turning a wheel, the oscillation is buried inside the movement. You cannot see a wobble in a hand that is traveling. But the bigger part is that the mobilization was being used. That is the whole design. The chemical arrives, the muscles are primed, and then you spend it. A system running at full output and being fully consumed does not rattle. It works. And there is one more thing. In a genuine emergency, your attention collapses to a single point. People describe it afterwards as tunnel vision. The world narrows to the one thing that matters, and everything else is edited out. Your own body is part of everything else. You may well have been shaking more than you knew. You simply had nothing left over to notice it with. Then it ends. The threat resolves, your attention releases, and it comes flooding back to a body you have not checked on for 2 minutes. Think about what your body did in the moment. It mobilized. It released fuel into your blood and primed every large muscle for enormous physical effort. It prepared you to sprint or to fight or to lift something that should have been impossible. That preparation was made for a specific kind of resolution. Running, struggling, violent total physical expenditure lasting seconds to minutes, and then the car passes. Nothing gets spent. You did not sprint, you did not fight. You stood in a stationary vehicle or in a doorway or at a desk gripping something, and the entire mobilization was called for and then never used. So the chemical is in your blood with nowhere to go. The muscles are primed with nothing to lift. The gain is turned all the way up on a system that has just been told to stand down. That is the shaking. It is not the emergency. It is the machinery of an emergency that never got to happen running on in a body that has already been informed the crisis is over. And this is also why it eases when you move. Anyone who has walked it off, or paced, or gripped, and released their fists has stumbled onto this. Movement gives the mobilization something to do. You are belatedly spending what was issued to you. The system was never designed to be switched off. It was designed to be used up. And there is one more piece of physiology that explains the delay, and it is almost too neat. Your danger response does not travel by one route. It travels by two at completely different speeds. The first is electrical. Nerve signals firing down through your body the instant a threat registers, arriving in fractions of a second. That is what makes you move before you have decided to move. That is the swerve you performed without consenting to it. The second is chemical. Adrenaline released into your bloodstream, and blood is slow. It has to be pumped out of those glands around your circulatory system and delivered to receptors spread throughout your muscles. That takes time. Not much, but enough. Tens of seconds to reach full strength, minutes to clear. So, the wave that turns up the gain on your tremor does not peak when the danger appears. It peaks slightly afterwards and then lingers, washing through a body that no longer has any use for it. Which means the timing was never mysterious. The fast system handled the emergency. The slow system arrived just behind it, right on schedule for a crisis that had already ended. You are not shaking because something went wrong. You are shaking because the second wave arrived at a door that had already closed. Which brings us to what this actually says about being a person now. Look at where you feel this most. For most people, most of the time, it is not a predator. It is not a car. It is a conversation. A confrontation with someone at work. A message you have to send. A meeting where you have to say the thing that will not be popular. A phone call you have been avoiding for 3 days. And your body responds to that email with a system that was assembled for physical combat and physical escape. The heart rate that would have carried you up a hill at full speed. The fuel dumped into your blood for a sprint you will not take. The large muscles primed to strike something. For a document, you are sitting in a chair perfectly safe in a heated room, receiving a full-body preparation for violence that has nowhere to land. And the only visible sign of that mismatch is a slight humiliating tremor in the hand holding the mouse. That is what the shaking really is in a modern life. Not a malfunction, a mismatch. You have a body built for a kind of danger your life no longer serves, running its ancient protocol against an inbox. And there is one more thing worth saying about it because it changes how the tremor feels. The shaking is honest. You can control your face. You can steady your voice with effort. You can choose your words carefully and hold your posture and present a version of yourself that is entirely composed. You cannot instruct your hands. They are downstream of a system you have no conscious access to, and they will report the truth regardless of what the rest of you has decided to perform. Which means the trembling you have spent your life hiding is not weakness leaking out. It is the one part of you that cannot lie. And when you see it in someone else in a hand that will not hold still while they say something difficult, you are not looking at fragility. You are looking at how much it cost them to say it. That is worth remembering the next time you watch someone's voice go or their hands in the middle of telling you something they have clearly been carrying for a while. They did not choose to show you that. Their body decided for them. Which makes it one of the few things a person cannot fake, and one of the few things worth taking seriously without needing to be told. So come back to the question, the one you have never actually asked in all the times it has happened to you. Why do you shake when you are angry or badly frightened? Not because something in you is breaking. Not because you are weak or cowardly or unable to handle it. And not in the end, because your body was trying to help you fight. Your hands have been trembling your entire life. That fine, fast oscillation is what a stabilizing system looks like from the outside, running constantly catching your body as it drifts thousands of times a minute invisible. Then something frightens you or infuriates you, and the chemical arrives and turns the sensitivity up. The corrections overshoot. The invisible becomes visible. That is all it is. Not a new event. An old one amplified. And it arrives after the danger because it was never a tool for the danger. It is the sound of a mobilization that was called for and never spent still running in a body, standing perfectly still in a quiet kitchen. Whether you call that fear or fury is decided somewhere else entirely after the fact by a mind looking for a reason. So the trembling hand is not asking you to be ashamed of it. It is showing you the machinery. The moment is already over. The car has passed, the door is closed, the room is quiet, and you are standing there holding the counter with both hands. Only now you know what you are holding on to, not fear, not weakness. A body doing exactly what it was built to do, at full volume for a threat that came and went without ever needing it. Give it a minute. Let it spend what it was handed. It will settle the way it always does back down to the tremor that was there all along.